You're listening to Paris: A State of Mind on Paris Underground Radio.
Welcome to Paris: A State of Mind. Join us as we talk about the good, the bad, the ins, the outs of property rentals and purchases in and around Paris. We'll have topics for renters, owners, and visitors, share questions we are regularly asked, and more. My name is Gail Boisclair of Perfectly Paris, and my co-host is Marie Pistinier of Lokim Paris. Be a part of it. Both of us are proud members of the SPLM, the first representative body of furnished rental professionals. Hi, Marie. How are you?
I'm very fine. I think that I always say the same the same answer when you ask me, Gail. How are you doing?
Well, I say the same thing too, and I ask you the same question every time. I'm fine like sunshine. So, in our last episode, we touched on for the first time managing a vacation rental. We had part one, and we realized that it's kind of a big topic and a little bit different from other property management. So, today we're going to take a nosedive into another part two. We'll talk about a bit about the pros and cons of renting on your own, or as we like to say, DIY. Once you have set up your apartment in terms of like furnishings, amenities, and utilities, you then have to consider how you want to rent out your apartment. In other words, do you want to do it yourself or do you want to use a professional? Should we answer what we think? No. We won't answer what we think. Well, but I think the first most important thing is they have to make sure that they can legally rent out their property as a vacation rental. And if the person is not sure, the simplest thing to do is to check on the website for your local city hall or mairie. And if you're based in Paris, then maybe listen to our previous episode, number 17, to find out more information about the regulations for renting out vacation rentals in Paris, right?
Exactly. This is a very important thing. But then, among all the things that you have to consider before deciding if you are going to rent it on your own or with an agency, one of the biggest consideration would be the time factor and organization, wouldn't you think?
Absolutely. I think people have no idea. I have had over the years several cases where owners were trying to do things on their own, but in the end found it too difficult and time consuming. Even if you factor in just the time to communicate back and forth with a potential guest before they decide to rent an apartment, this can sometimes be a lot just on its own. And then when someone has decided to rent the place, then you'll need to do up all sorts of paperwork for the rental to make sure that they have a contract, check your planning to make sure the dates are free, update any sort of calendar system you use, and everyone, by the way, will need a calendar system.
Yes, this is just mandatory because when you hold a flat on one side and then you have all those other that you have to to update, it's like the
Oh.
worst nightmare. And this is very consuming. And we talk about this. This is even before you the apartment is guest ready. Speaking of which, what does it mean exactly when your apartment is guest ready?
That's a very, very good question. And it's a lot more than simply making sure there's clean sheets and towels. It's also organizing things in the apartment. For example, the cutlery drawers, the cupboards, the shelves, the bookcases, making sure the apartment is properly cleaned and maintained. If you have a dripping faucet, have it fixed before your guests arrive. And cleaning does not mean just a quick wiping down of the service. Guest expectations for people coming on a holiday can often be more than what you may think. You may not mind looking at a bit of mold or mildew in your shower. I personally can't stand that, and I clean my shower at least 3 times a week. I'm a maniac. But your guest will probably not feel the same way. They probably don't want to take a shower with some black mold growing around their toes. I think that people sometimes forget that a lot of people who stay in apartments may be used to staying in hotels. So that means that expectations can often be similar to what you would have in hotels. This, however, can be a whole other episode of its own.
Yeah, I completely agree that we should do a future podcast on maintenance and cleaning because even cleaning on itself can be like a full hours of of tips and tricks in order to make sure your guests are just feeling good once they are home. I think another big topic to consider when you want to try to do it on your own is where will you find renters for your apartments? It's not once it's guest ready, then where do you find the guests?
Oh, well, I think you should stake out like the local hotels in your area. And when you see somebody getting dropped off with a luggage, don't let them go in the hotel and ask them if they want to rent an apartment instead. Right?
Yeah, yeah, you can
No?
try that. Not sure that will give you a
Ah.
head of like a calendar which will
It's
be fully
it's
booked in
good for last
advance.
minute bookings.
Yeah,
No?
you can try that.
No, it's important to think of because if you don't have a lot of people who you personally know that will rent your apartment, as is the case of almost 100% of the people, you will need to really pay for advertising on a big rental portal. And some of these sites will charge an annual fee, but most of them now have moved up to pay per booking percentages of any reservation they take. The problem is when you list on a different website, it is keeping your calendar updated. So some people will use a channel manager to do that to streamline their work because like if you've got your apartment say on one website and you plug in the dates there, but then you've also got your apartment on another website, a competitor booking platform, you've got to try to think about updating it there, and then you've probably got your own calendar that you're using that you've got to think about updating it there. So that's why I'm saying some people use something called a channel manager where you just update it on one site. It's called a channel manager. And the channel manager then magically updates it on all these other sites for you.
Yeah, and most of the time it's mainly professional real estate agent, later, sublater, and all the conciergerie will have their channel manager. It's less common for an owner. And do you think that it would help if an owner build up his own website?
Well, I definitely think that having your own website from a branding perspective is a really great idea. But if you're trying to get your website noticed, chances are that you're just going to be lost in the crowd with other websites. So I'm not sure it'd really help you find renters because I mean, as soon as you do a search, you're going to see all the big booking websites come up.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there are actually pros and cons of writing on your own. And it seems that everything is saying that it would be better to have some help with this, don't you think?
Well, you know what we always say, use a professional.
Yeah, you're right. But there is some bias because we are professional.
We are a little bit biased. We're right. Working with an agent or an agency, though, can already help as they probably have also a client base of guests. So, at least if they're a reputable agency and have been around for a while, when you're worried about whether or not you'll be able to convince those people in front of the hotel to last minute stay in your place, hopefully the agent or agency you're working with will have a little more luck than that.
Yes, that brings another good question. So, how do you choose an agency or a property manager for your apartment or your property? Because it's not only a Parisian topic.
Well, yeah, and I mean, that is a very good question, and I think it's something that almost needs a whole episode in itself because it's really complicated. I mean, for us right now, we just want to talk about on this episode the pros and the cons of renting out on your own. And definitely, I think the pro of renting out on your own is that you're saving yourself a little bit of money, right?
Yeah, sure.
But the of renting out on your own is you've got really probably more work than what you've bargained for. So sometimes maybe that saving a little bit of money isn't worthwhile what you're spending in terms of time. And as you said, like a website, what happens, the pros and cons of renting on your own? How is somebody going to find your spend a week in Paris website on the internet?
Yeah, it's not what it used to be a few years back because SEO, the search engine optimization, is not the same, and it's now having. But a lot of owners on their own will use some platforms to go to in order to advertise for their properties. So we could say that if you do have time ahead, if you can have time to welcome the guest, if you can have time to make all the back and forth, because you can say, I used to do that for long years, answering your clients when they ask you if there is I don't know, any cutting board. We were talking about that, even though it's in the ads, but people needs to be reassured, and you need, sometimes they will ask you three times the same question, but then you have to do the back and forth thing in order to welcome them. So probably if you do have some times and maybe some little bit of technical skills in order to manage all your different websites and platforms and prices and everything, maybe it could be something interesting to do. But if you don't have any time ahead, I guess that the professional would be the one who will be ready to help. Of course, you have to pay for that, but it's part of the deal, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, a funny thing is when I first started managing properties, it was for family, so it was personal, it wasn't professional. And I had my own website. At the time, it was called Week in Paris, which eventually turned into Perfectly Paris. But it was called Week in Paris, so it was a little website in a sea of plenty. But that was back in 2001, where it was things were completely different, and people actually did find my little itty bitty website online. But in this day and age, it's not going to be the case, because there's too many, as you say, search engine optimization. Oh, that's a tongue twister for me to
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
And no, you're right. Also, one of the things that we can add on top of that, and I think that we already mentioned that in a previous episode, is that if you work with a real estate agent, then the management fees can be deductible, can be tax deductible in your full, when you are going to declare your incomes, when it's real and not forfeit. So I suggest you can browse our episode, because we talked about that a little bit earlier than that. I don't have in mind the episode number, but all things related to the flat management, if you work with a real estate agent, I'm not sure that it would work with someone who is doing services, because the category they are in may not work. It can be also deductible. So sometimes, even though you spend a little money on having someone, when you want to delegate all the work to someone else, but then a part can be rewarded when you do your taxes.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. And you're right. I can't remember what episode that is on either. I'm a little fuzzy in the brain. If you're enjoying this episode of Paris: A State of Mind, you may also be interested in our sister podcast, The Heart of You. Join Annette as she helps you explore your soul through intuition, spirituality, and more. Paris: A State of Mind will be right back after a word from our sponsors. And now back to Paris: A State of Mind. So I didn't pros and cons. We really didn't do very many pros and cons. We basically kind of said, yeah, only do it if you really have the time to do it. That's, I think, the bottom line. Otherwise, it's complicated. And I mean, that's not even getting into a situation of what do you actually do then when a guest arrives if you're doing it on your own. What if you don't live in Paris all the time? Who's supposed to meet your guest if you're doing it on your own?
Don't say, okay, I do have the superintendent in the building who can handle the keys. This is not a proper check-in. So
Yeah.
either you have done something remotely, which happens, you have many services that can help you to do some remote work, but then you have to put a lot of times in order to set the things up, so the clients don't feel just abandoned right in the middle of the day in Paris, when especially they don't speak the language.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's kind of, it could be very nervous. It might be their first time coming to Paris on holiday. As you say, they don't speak the language. They have a hard time finding the key. They don't know if it's real, or if if they're going to be sleeping under a pont de Paris or not. So, I mean, yeah, it's not really fair to the guests then to put them through the turmoil and the stress of not knowing that somebody is going to be there in person to meet them.
And once your guest on site, then, speaking of having some times to dedicate it to them, there is all the thing that could happen when they are there.
Hmm.
Internet is not working any longer, so this is like a huge crisis for your clients who is just there for a few days. So if there is any shower who doesn't drain correctly, if there is any missing items, if the TV is not working, if there is like work ongoing with your upstairs neighbors, many things that you have to be available for your guests during their stay as well. So it's not only being able to answer a few emails and manage a few ads on some famous platforms. It has to be a little more than that.
Yeah, no, I do feel that it's a whole lot of other things, and we didn't even get into all of that because, I mean, you have to look at it. It still goes back to the one thing. Do you have the time to do it?
Exactly.
So that's really the thing. Save money, but do you have the time to deal with the fact that the woman has no water, or there's water leaking in from a neighbor, or they've got no internet and they've got a major call for work? Who knows?
Exactly.
Well, that was very precise and to the point, I think.
I hope so. Feel free to send us some questions if you'd like. No problem.
Exactly. Don't hesitate on any of our episodes. If you have something to ask Marie and I, you know that we are just an email away. You can contact us through Paris Underground Radio. Voila. Well, shall we say goodbye for now, Marie, and get
I,
on with our day for today?
I think so. And I think that we should mention that the next episode should be definitely how to choose your property manager.
Oh, yes.
Not only because we push and say, okay, probably it's a better thing to work with the property managers, but how do you choose property managers? And it's not only to say that you have to choose us. It's not it's not part of the episode. It just this would be the next episode. Have a good day, Gail.
Thanks, you too, Marie.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Paris: A State of Mind, featuring Gail of Perfectly Paris and Marie of Loquim, both who are founding members of the SPLM. Paris: A State of Mind is produced by Paris Underground Radio. The music, Jazz in Paris, is by Media Right Productions. For more information on this show and others, go to parisundergroundradio.com.
This episode of Paris: A State of Mind was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more on this show and shows like it, please visit parisundergroundradio.com.